Hi, good afternoon. Today I would like to talk about further carry on with the previous video. In the previous video, I talked about how a certain group of economists in the 17th and 18th century thought that production of agricultural goods is what generates the wealth in economy. In this video, I would like to carry forward that thought process and suggest and talk about a thinker who had added to what the group of economists in the last video talked about. The group of economists in the last video, they were called physiocrats, and they said that production of agricultural goods is what generates wealth in the economy. Now, in this video, I'll talk about a Scottish economist called Adam Smith, who lived between 1723 and 1790. And according to him, not only agricultural goods but all goods produced in an economy generates wealth in an economy. This is what Adam Smith had extended to what the physiocrats had thought. Further, it was a time when the prevailing thought in economics was about regarding the generation of wealth was based on the fact that gold, whichever country had accumulated a lot of gold, that country is rich. That was the thought process that was prevalent at that time. Now, Adam Smith had said that is not the case, because uh, a country could get rich also by restricting the imports, the imports of foreign goods into its country. This way, what would happen is the people in the country would have less choice while buying goods in general in the country. They will have to buy the goods produced by the industries within the country. They won't have a chance to buy foreign goods, which could possibly be cheaper than those produced in the country. And therefore, the people in the country were losing out at buying cheap goods when imports when there were import restrictions. Import restrictions came from the government. It came in the form of imposition of tax on imports and also banning certain luxurious foreign goods. So what Adam Smith had told was that uh, based on the concept that wealth of a country is gold, or accumulation of gold, was flawed. It did not benefit the society as a whole, because, as I told you, customers in the country would have to pay more for the goods, and and it's only the merchants or the factory owners who produce goods within the country who are benefiting because of import restrictions. Let me also tell you what would happen if imports were restricted, either by high taxation of the imports or by complete high taxation of the imports. Let me tell you what happens. The foreign goods will be expensive within that country in which the goods are imported, and there could be a point where the local goods might be less expensive than the foreign goods, but the local goods are still expensive enough. If the import restrictions wouldn't have been there, there was a possibility that the foreign goods would be cheaper, and that would give people within the country an opportunity to buy those cheaper goods compared to the more expensive goods produced within the country. So this is what Adam Smith told. The group of people who had believed that whichever country had the most gold was rich, were called mercantilists. So Adam Smith had attacked the mercantilist in the way I told you right now. Adam Smith's idea was carried forward by another British economist called David Ricardo, who lived between 1772 and 1823. So this was a time in Britain when Britain had imposed certain laws on the import of grains, foreign grains, and these laws were called Corn Laws. and uh, and David Ricardo had said that it would be better if there would be better wealth generation within Britain if Britain had done away with the corn laws which restricted the import of foreign grains. And he had backed up his idea with sound logic. He was known as a person who had sound reasoning towards economy. He was one of the first person to bring reasoning into economy, David Ricardo. So with this reasoning, what he had said was, if the Britain had done away with the corn laws which banned the import of foreign grains into the country, even before that, the prices of grains in Britain were very high due to various reasons. I'll not go into those reasons. And David Ricardo had said that if the ban on the foreign grains into the country was lifted, the prices of the grain within the country would come down. Because um, firstly, the people within the country were buying these expensive food grains and they were losing out. And I told you that David Ricardo was talking about wealth creation. What if ban on import restriction was lifted? How is that related to wealth creation in a country? David Ricardo said that there would be wealth creation and it will happen very quickly. He had a very sound reasoning behind this. The reasoning is like this. So if cheap foreign grain entered the country, the prices of the food grains would come down, and the people in the country would benefit because of these low food prices, because they can buy cheaper food grains. Now let us take, for example, if the cheap grains did not enter the country, there wouldn't be competition within those people who produce grain, or those people who sell grain within the country, the local people, and hence they charge high prices, and there are other reasons for the high prices as well. People in the country would have to buy those grains at a very high cost, and if the foreign grains entered, and it would be the workers, and among the people there will be the workers who worked in the factories. It was a time when uh, Britain was going through industrial revolution, and these factory owners had certain workers, and factory owners engaged the workers with a wage. So let us say that these workers were paying high prices for their food grains. The factory owners would have to give them high wages so as to allow these workers to sustain themselves. They had to buy those grains which were at high price. And finally, the factory owners will be left with less money to be able to invest in production the next year, or for the production of more goods. And then what happens is, as I told you, Adam Smith had said that wealth is generated in a country if a country generates more goods. Now here is a case where the factory owners are not having enough money to invest to produce those goods. So therefore there will be less goods that will be produced. So the wealth creation in the country would come down. So if foreign grains were allowed, if cheap foreign grains were allowed, the food prices would come down, and the workers in the country will be able to buy these food prices at low cost. They will be able to buy the food grains at low prices. The capitalist factory owners who paid these workers a certain wage need not pay high wages, because the factory owners were already getting the food grains at cheap costs, cheap prices. And once the factory owners don't have to pay these high wages, they'll be left with more money. And with this money, they can invest in more production of the goods for the next year or in the same year. And again, according to Adam Smith, country which produces more goods generates more wealth. And here, in this case, the factory owners would invest and produce more goods and generate more wealth. And therefore, the link therefore there will be wealth generation and it will happen quickly. And therefore, the link between the import of grains into the country and the wealth generation was was made by David Ricardo, and this was the link, as I told you. David Ricardo not only talked about uh, wealth creation, he had also talked about uh, countries which trade would be better. Countries trading between countries is beneficial for both the countries. He had introduced a concept of free trade, and let me tell you what this is. Let us say there are two countries, Britain and France. So let us say Britain produces steel, and I'll take Russia. So Britain and Russia. So and Russia produces wheat. And let us also say that Britain produces both steel and wheat, and it does so much better than Russia. And what I mean by that is it produces more goods of steel and wheat, and it produces it cheaply, more cheaply than Russia. Now the question that David Ricardo answered here was, would it be better if Britain produced both the goods and not trade at all with Russia, or would it be better if both these countries traded? What David Ricardo said was that the later option was beneficial for both the countries than the first option. For this, he had given a certain law, and what he was essentially telling was that if Britain had produced only, I told you that Britain produces steel as well as wheat. Russia produces only wheat. Britain produces steel better than wheat, though Britain produces both steel and wheat better than Russia. So in such a case, David Ricardo had suggested that it would be better for Britain to stick to producing only steel and do away with producing wheat, and sell this wheat, or exchange the steel with Russia for the wheat. That way there will be an exchange of large number of products at cheap rates for both the countries. This is what David Ricardo had suggested. To further emphasize the point as to why this is true, let me take an example. Let us say there are two people. There is one per there the and okay. Let us say there are two people, and they were asked to do a certain task, and the task was to move certain chairs which are disordered, as well as sweep the floor. We know that the first person A, let us say the first person is A, we know that the first person A is good at both sweeping the floor quickly as well as moving the chairs and putting them in an orderly fashion. The second person B is not good at any of these two. Now the question is, how would they want to share their work in such a way that work gets done quickly? The result should be there should be quick work that should be done. According to David Ricardo, one could think that even before that there is a condition. The condition is the person A is better at working, at moving the chairs than he is with sweeping the floor, even though he's better at both the works compared to B. In such a case, if you were to use the logic of David Ricardo, one would say that A can stick to doing moving the chairs, and B can do the other work of sweeping the floor, and if both of them do that way, they would complete the work quickly. Now let me tell you why this is true. So if I told you that person A is good at moving the chairs than he is at sweeping the floor, though he is good at both the things compared to B. If the person A sticks to only moving the chairs, Or let us say if the person um, does both the if the person A does both the works, that is mowing the chairs as well as sweeping the floor, in the time he sweeps the floor, he would lose an opportunity to move the chairs. Let us say he sweeps 1 meter of floor. For sweeping, in the time he sweeps 1 meter of floor, he can finish moving 3 chairs. And let us say that the person B, to complete sweeping 1 meter floor, he in the time he completes sweeping 1 meter floor, he moves only 1 chair. We can clearly see that person A would lose more if he sweeps the floor, that is the 1 meter floor, than person B, because person A, in the time he completes 1 meter floor, he could have moved 3 chairs, whereas in the same time the person B moves only 1 chair. So person B does not lose as much in terms of moving chairs if he had stuck to only if the person B had stuck to only sweeping the floor, in this case 1 meter floor, or the entire floor. In other words, what we can say is person B has a comparative advantage in sweeping the floor compared to person A. Are you getting me? So this law is called law of comparative advantage, and this law was given by David Ricardo. Using the same logic, even if Britain produced steel as well as the wheat, and if it was expert at producing both these goods compared to Russia, if Britain produces steel better than wheat, even though it produces both the goods compared to Russia, it would be better for Britain to produce only steel and leave the production of wheat to Russia, so that later on both of them can exchange their goods, and later on both these countries will be better off as they will exchange more number of goods and they will do so cheaply. So this is a concept given by David Ricardo. This present concept of law of comparative advantage is also accepted in the present day. In this video so far, I talked about how Adam Smith had extended the definition of wealth to production of all the goods, which was formerly only agricultural goods. And secondly, I also talked about what would happen if a country had stopped restricting the imports into that country. There would be wealth creation and it will happen quickly. And I also told that if two countries traded, how it will be beneficial for both the countries. This is the concept of free trade or law of comparative advantage. The concept of free trade is still in use today. A lot of economists use them, and there are economists who have also challenged the concept of free trade, and one such economist was a German economist called Friedrich List, and I'll talk about him in the next video. So I hope you found this video about the philosophy behind wealth creation of a nation and free trade interesting. Thank you very much.